A few months ago, I had a conversation with someone that it really stayed with me, this conversation. This man was successful by most standards. He is very successful, but he doesn't really consider himself to be successful. He has a great career, respect in his field, and someone people often turn to for advice. In fact, that's all people come to him for. And on the surface, everything looks stable, everything looks great. But at one point in our conversation, he paused and said something that really surprised me. He said, I feel like I've been running on momentum for years, and now I'm not too sure how to stop. I just feel like I keep on going. I keep on, excelling and succeeding. But he wasn't talking about the work alone. He was talking about everything in his life. And the pressure to keep going was just there, to make more, to succeed more, to have more, and to keep performing so that way he could keep up with being the person that everyone expects him to be, when in fact inside he just was feeling kind of lost. And he wasn't alone with this. This is what struck me, is that there is a lot of this that's been going on over the past few years. You look at the last 5 or 6 years, I've been hearing different versions of this with so many different people. Even for myself, things have shifted so quickly, year after year, actually. And people who appear strong and capable on the outside, but inside they're asking themselves, wait a second, what's going on with my health? How can I bring more balance to my life? How can I feel better? What is my purpose in this world? And how life has changed so drastically, and about how much longer they can keep on pushing and forcing without taking care of themselves. You look at the last 6 years, look at 6 years ago, the world was very different, and it felt very different. Our routines were predictable. Our plans felt stable. Most people had a clear sense of how their days would be, because that before the pandemic arrived and disrupted everything, things seemed to be going in a certain level of stability. Daily routines changed overnight. Our lives changed. People began working from home. Schools were closed, restaurants were closed, travel stopped. Conversations about health became constant about, are you taking good care of yourself? Are you taking your vitamins? Are you getting enough exercise? And many people, for the first time they had ever confronted uncertainty in their life on such a large scale. And something interesting happened during this time. When the usual distractions disappeared, many people were left alone with their own thoughts. And questions began surfacing. I remember having many conversations at that time of how people's priorities were changing, how they were questioning their health, they were questioning their career, they were questioning their relationships, the pace that their life had been living, that they had been living was at the pace that they wanted to continue. And some people realized that they were exhausted. They were just tired. And some people realized that they felt disconnected with what they were doing, that they didn't have a sense of purpose, and they felt disconnected from themselves. They felt disconnected with the relationships that they had in their life. And while life has gradually returned to something resembling normal, I don't know if we want to call it normal or not, but many people are still processing all those years, of what was revealed to them. And one of the most powerful struggles that people face during times of change involves something we rarely openly discuss because it makes us uncomfortable, and that is our ego. Not ego in the sense of arrogance, but the sense of identity. Our ego in the sense of identity, the roles that we build, the image that we create for ourselves. A lot of times these expectations that feel obligated to maintain. For many years, people define themselves through productivity and what they contribute, through achievement, through goals, through reaching their goals, through their ability to handle everything without slowing down, to just push through, to power through, being the dependable one, being the one that everybody goes to, being the strong one, the one who never falls behind. And at some point, you begin to question your identity. And that's the ego that I want to talk about. That's the identity that we have been holding on to. Someone who always has been the provider suddenly faces financial uncertainty, for example, or someone who built their life around their career success begins questioning whether this pace is even sustainable. And someone who always took pride in being the person who never needed help suddenly realizes that they are exhausted and they could use some help. These moments can feel very unsettling. I'm sure that you've experienced them, maybe experiencing them now. I know I have several times over and over again. It's because this challenges the image that we have built of ourselves in this world. But that can also become a very powerful turning point when you realize that you're not resonating with who you are portraying into the world. You know, the wake up calls that we get in our life comes from experience. You know, over the past many years, people have experienced some kind of wake up call, whether it's a sudden illness, a loss of a job, chronic fatigue. Most of the time, it's through health that really gets our attention. Other times, it can come through emotional signals, feeling disconnected with those around us, you know, not feeling connected to your family, losing patience with one another because everything feels heavier, everything feels like a burden, or simply just realizing that when everything feels heavier, you don't know what to do. You know, I remember speaking to someone who had spent years building a successful career, long hours, constant travel. I mean, the top of his game. And when everything slowed down during the pandemic, he decided to retire. And he realized at that time that he did not know how to relax, that there were things that he did not work through that had happened from 20 years ago on an emotional level. His body had been operating in this high gear, high alert for so long that it really started to feel uncomfortable to kind of bring it down. And he decided to retire in this time. And when he began paying attention to his health for the first time in many years and decades, maybe, he discovered how much tension he had been holding on to. And it was a moment that forced him to decompress and reconsider how he had been living and how he wanted to live going forward. You know, why our health is often the first thing we neglect. I tell you, one of the most common patterns that I see is how easily people place well-being at the bottom of their priority list. But when something goes wrong, it's the first one. You know, work usually comes first, responsibilities come first, everyone else becomes first, and self-care becomes like the last thing. They keep on promising themselves that they'll get to it eventually, but eventually, you know, weeks turns into months and months turn into years until the body begins asking for attention. Fatigue, not able to sleep, high stress, sleep disruption, loss of focus, irritability. And these are not random inconveniences. These are signals that are telling us that something within our lives we need to adjust, we need to change. And the longer that those signals go unanswered, the louder they become, and they become chronic. For many people, making self-care a priority feels uncomfortable at first because they don't know about it. They've never learned it. They've never, you know, their healthcare provider may not have talked to them about it because we are constantly rewarding people pushing through and succeeding and achieving things. We have been conditioned to feel, you know, uncomfortable. But when you start to realize that real strength often involves something very different, it involves some sort of awareness, self-awareness, awareness of your surroundings. It involves recognizing when the pace we have been living at is no longer sustainable. It also involves giving ourselves permission to slow down and to rest before the body demands it. Taking care of your health is not selfish. It is one of the most responsible things that you can do. And when we are physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually well, we show up more fully in our everyday lives, in our relationships, at our work, you know, just everywhere, in our ability to think clearly, to make better decisions. Self-care is not a luxury. It's actually the foundation of what is important in our life. You know, these past several years have changed so many people in so many ways, and people are discovering, still rediscovering who they want to be. Some of these changes have been quite difficult, I know, for a lot of us, but they've also created a great opportunity, an opportunity to reflect of how we are living, how we are choosing to live, how we care for our bodies, how we care for each other, and how we define success and strength, and what that means to us. You know, if there's one lesson many people have learned during this time that I hear over and over again, it's that health and well-being cannot remain as an afterthought. It cannot be bought. It cannot be replaced once it's gone. And this is central to everything else. Your health and well-being is your foundation. That is your greatest wealth in your life. And so you've been feeling the weight of these changes and have been wondering like what you need to do. If your body's asking for more attention, consider this message very carefully. It may be inviting you to slow down. It just may be asking you to listen a little bit more closely and to begin to create a life that where taking care of yourself takes priority, that it's no longer something that you postpone, but something that you value and that you cherish. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear your perspective. How have the past few years changed you in the way that you think about your health and well-being? I'd love to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you like more conversations like this, please be sure to subscribe so we can continue exploring topics together. Thank you so much, and till next time.